Hello, good morning. How are you? This is Lee. This is Lee. I am Lee. This is Arcat, and welcome. Good morning. This is the next 2 hours we'll be spending doing a little demonstration, having an art chat. We've been doing this for quite a while now, so as soon as you arrive, you can say hello in the chat bar. And if you have any questions, hopefully I'll be able to answer them for you regarding anything to do with your artwork. It's a really informal place, so it's really down to you what do you want to see and what do you want to have answered regarding your art. I've been working now for quite a while as an artist, and I've picked up a few tips and techniques along the way, and that's why I'm here to share them with you. It was initially all started off, the reason why I did this was because of COVID, and I had a real life in-person art class every Saturday and Monday. Unfortunately, they were cancelled because of COVID and the restrictions that were put in place. So I decided to try and move this across to an online platform where I could connect with the class, and it's kind of grown from there. So people now join us from all over the world, which is great, and it brings a new flavour as well because everybody's appreciation of art, their different cultural backgrounds, what they're trying to achieve with their artwork is all different, and we all have different requirements that we want to try and achieve in our artwork. My background is quite diverse. I initially trained in fine craft design, specialising in ceramics. But part of that course, we were taught to draw, and drawing was an important integral part of our ceramics. We had to figure out how to render things in three-dimensional forms so we could understand when we were making it. It would save us an awful lot of time. And that kind of grew from there. I was also a jewellery designer. I've also been a qualified stonemason, and I've sculpted in stone. And I've worked my own art career in a more fine art direction. So now I do more painting and drawing. It's not to say I don't dabble now and again, and I choose different mediums to suit different projects. But I've really kind of settled in a more fine art response to my artwork, and most of it has been, when I look back, has been all to do with portraiture. So although I'm working in portraits predominantly during these drawing classes, it doesn't mean to say these techniques and elements that I talk about can't be transformed into different genres. So say for example, if you were doing landscapes, a lot of the elements are very, very similar, because we all look at form, we look at light, we look at textures, we look at effects of media to try and give an influence of a certain mood. And even if you're working in something like an abstract, it's how you make your mediums fit on the page, but also carry over your concept. So it's a balance between a technique and your concept. The concept being the idea, the reason why you want to create the artwork, but also the technique is very important, is how you deliver it. So a lot of these elements that I'll be talking about can transfer in between all these different genres, and it may be about composition. So how do you push things back in a pictorial frame, and how do you bring things forward? That can obviously work across all art form platforms. Different qualities of line, and how something might appear quite delicate, or something might be very robust. So all of these different things can have a real effect on your artwork, and there's things to consider when you're starting to build up your toolbox of techniques, and how you can appropriately use the best one for the best representation in your idea. Does that make sense? Do say hello when you come in the chat room, because it's nice to kind of bounce off people when they arrive, and say, if it's just to say hello, it's great. You can sit back and just watch or listen, or carry on with your own artwork as well. I'm always interested to find out what you're working on, what you're drawing at the time. You know, are you having any issues with it, problems with it, difficulties that you find, frustrations that you have? I have them. All artists have them. There's always that element as an artist. You're always trying to push your artwork a little bit more, a little bit more. Some of the best artists that I know out there at the moment are constantly striving to see how far they can push their envelope, and so push the boundaries of their capabilities. And sometimes it fails, and that's okay. It's a part of the process. And I think starting out, it's one of the things that trip us up, where if we fail, we think we are the failure and we shouldn't bother. and it's just too difficult. And but what I want to say to you is it's part of the process, and it's something that you embrace. And when you make a mistake or an issue on your artwork which you don't like, is to take a step back and see how you can rectify it, or see where you deviated from your plan, and to pull it back a bit. And you might have to start again, but that's okay. It's part of the process. That repetition of trial and error fine-tunes your approach to your artwork, not just visually, but your artistic side as well. So your concepts and ideas about how they might mature, how they might develop. Sometimes your concepts dictate the techniques it might use, and sometimes where you have a certain affinity with an art process, that can dictate how you might transfer that and manipulate your concept. So it is a bit of a balance between the two. So what I'm going to look at to you today, I did one from this last week. It's a book that I picked up, and I've found it really interesting. It was by a gentleman called Nathan Folks, How to Draw Portraits in Charcoal. And there was an image that we did last week, and I was kind of working through some of the issues that I find with portraits myself. So I found it very helpful and beneficial. So I've got a link for that, which hopefully, if I pop this up, it'll come up as an Amazon link. Now this is associated with Amazon, so you don't pay anything extra if you click on it and buy the book, but I will get a small payback. It's not very much, but so you can look out elsewhere for this book if you like, or local bookstores, or if you want to support local businesses. I'm going to pop that up in the link bar. Click over there so I can see my screens as well. So hopefully that'll pop up. If not, I'll pop it up in the show notes at the end. So that's the front cover of the book, just to prove I do actually have it and I'm not just sneaking it off the internet. I have actually got the book. It is a great book. There's some lovely images in here. There's some lovely qualities of marks, almost abstract in their own forms, and very expressive. I was looking at some of these and thought, oh god, these have such a visual memory of Tamara Lempicka. There's really broad graphite strokes in the book that have a almost a 19 sort of 30s look to them. They're quite expressive and sculptural in their form, and it's the medium I'll be using today is charcoal, and the book is also obviously about charcoal, but there's an image I pulled up, obviously you can see there on the right hand side. Hi Alex, good to see you. Nice to have you here. I think it might be just you and me at the moment, but that's cool. So yeah, I'm going to be working on a new image, as you can see. I love the drama of it. Part of my interest in working in sort of this monochrome takes me back to a child when I was watching old black and white movies as a kid. I used to watch them on Saturday morning. You know, we used to see them on BBC Two and things like that. But how dramatic the lighting was, and this has a very sort of theatrical feel to it. It's just something I'm visually tuned to, so it might not be your flavour of portraiture, but you can definitely see there's a narrative in there. It's more than just a person. It's you know, like a passport photograph of somebody who's sitting very, very still looking at the camera. It has something else to it, and some of it comes through the expressive lines. Obviously it's about the composition and the lighting. That's something that he's thought about. And so I want to say to you as well, whenever you're getting your references, think about those things. Start to think about those things. You might be just flicking through magazines to look for images to copy at the moment to develop your skills, and that's okay. Draw Mode, hello, good to see you. So yeah, if you're flicking through magazines and you're looking for elements to inspire you visually, start to think about what is it about that picture that stood out to you, because that's some of the elements you can use for your concepts later on down the line. You might see that it might be a certain flavour of how lighting is done, or it might be a certain compositional style that somebody's used, and you might find a link. So you can keep like a scrapbook, whether that's over on your phone in little files, so you've got all of your inspirational images that you find. You can go to galleries and find other artworks, look at different art books, different artists online. Instagram's a great place for that. If you start following lots of artists in your newsfeed, you'll just get a constant feed, a constant inspiration roll of different artworks that are being produced, and you can cherry pick elements out of each of them. It doesn't have to be a carbon copy of a process of an artist. It can be elements of an artist. So it might be, say, how one artist uses composition, how another artist uses medium, how another artist uses light, and put those together. And out of the practice, your style will develop. Often I find that when people are starting off, they try and create a style and inject it into every portrait that they do because they think that is their style. It can be a bit of a cul-de-sac early on, because if you start to get a bit of success with that style, you might think, oh, I can't deviate from this now because this is what I'm known for. And unfortunately, it can become kind of a bit limiting in ways, because you're scared to deviate from it because it has some success. If you allow your processes to develop, your artwork moves along with you, and so does your audience, if you like. It's not to say that everything you do is going to be liked by everybody. This is the other thing you got to kind of balance. Not everything you do is artistically liked by everybody. So you will find a collection of your niche, your bit of the pie in the art world, that will have a similarity to you and to your artistic kind of preferences. And I'd say go and seek those out, because they can be another avenue of resource for inspiration, where if you are working alongside other artists who have a similar thought processes, and this is how kind of schools of artwork develop. Often people think, oh, schools of artwork only developed out of writing a manifesto and having a close network of friends who do the same thing as you, and you all work on the same sort of hymn sheet. Back in the day, yes, that was kind of the thing, but today we have the internet, where we have such just a mass of artists out there worldwide, that you might find there's a page on Facebook that has a bunch of artists who are kind of just starting out artists on the Facebook page, or people who love landscapes. Find those sources out. There may be more than one of them, and you can cherry pick which ones work best for you, and give as much as you receive. If you find a great bit of information, you share with them what you found as well. And I find that the biggest uptake in somebody's artistic knowledge is when they are sharing it with other artists. And I say artists because that's what you are. There's no pedestal that you should put the artist's name on. It's basically something that you're doing, and you might be a young artist, and I say young as in your experience, not your age, because you could start this in your 70s and 80s and just be as inspired and enthusiastic and hungry for knowledge as somebody starting out when they're 15, 16, 17, 18, whatever the age is. So when I say young artist, I mean somebody's just starting out in their own little art path, and you can take it as far as you want. So today we're going to be working on this portrait. I don't need to have that picture up right now of the book. I'll put a link in that in the show notes at the end. I was trying to share it there on the screen, but it didn't actually pop up, so I'll definitely pop that up. Hopefully it did. I don't know if it popped up on your screen or not. So yeah, I'll get rid of that one. So it just leaves. I'm going to move my head out of the way so you don't see the side of my head anymore. So we work on this one today. People will know if they've watched this before. There's a Sky TV program called Portrait Artist of the Year, and every Sunday during lockdown, or over at least the last 5 weeks, they've had a celebrity sitter on their Sky TV Facebook page, and they actually produce a little program. It's about 4 hours long, and you can paint and draw along with a live celebrity and also an artist from a previous episode, and they go through a conversation about how they draw, and they go through their own process, and you can do the same thing. And what's been wonderful is I think there's something like it's nearly 30,000 portraits. If you go to Instagram and have a look for the hashtag myPAOTW, it will show you vast numbers of pictures of celebrities that they've been drawing over the last 5 weeks, and they're really interesting to look at because some of them are done by people who are not art professionals but found a passion for art, and they're amazing. Some of them are just done by kids because they enjoy it and having fun with it, and so are the adults. Some of them are professional artists, and they're really trying to showcase what they can do. So it's really interesting to kind of see different people's approaches to the same subject matter and how different all of these portraits are, and they really come across in the wealth of art practice out there. So I've been doing this every Sunday. They did do it a while back at the beginning of the lockdown, and you can watch all of their videos if you go to the Artists of the Year Facebook page. You can see all their videos, and you can just sit back and watch through them. But it does go live on Sunday at 10 a.m. UK time, so you can join in. You can either just sit there and do your own thing and just watch what's going on and just listen to the conversation, because it can answer a lot of questions for you as well. So I did this as well. I've got a picture of Floella Benjamin, which is just hiding behind this sheet, which I'll flick up there. There she is. So we did this in 4 hours last Sunday, and it was such a great treat. I've got the time-lapse video that I normally take, and I found the time-lapse video a really useful tool for me because it's recording everything I do, and then I can sit back and I can watch how I visually look at something and portray it on a page, but also my adjustments, and it's helped me fine-tune my whole process. I initially did it for putting up on Instagram and for doing the ArtCat chat that we have on a Saturday, but I've actually started to think back and reflect on it and think this is actually a very useful tool. So you might want to try it, even if you're just doodling for an hour. Set the camera up, get your phone on a tripod. Most phone cameras now have a time-lapse facility. Get it set up so it's pointing at your drawing, and just see how your hand moves around the page. What it is, if you put something down, it's in the wrong place, how far do you go along in the portrait before you recognize it and see it and move it? All of those little elements are really interesting, and they kind of stick with you when you see it in a very short snippet time lapse, and you can see how things migrate and move around the page a little bit. So yeah, I've done that video. It'll go quiet because I was recording it without any sound, obviously, because it's time lapse. But this is a picture I did of Floella Benjamin. It lasts about a minute. It'll go quiet, but don't worry, I'm still here, and at the end of it I'll flick back. There might be a blank screen for a couple of seconds, but yeah, I'm still here. So enjoy. It'll last for about a minute. Alright? Okay, so that was it. Quite quick. So this is the original one under the page there. And what I found from the time lapse, because it's sort of taken with a mobile phone camera, it was just lightning. It was actually done on a grey toned paper, and it looked like it was done on a white paper. When I was drawing this out and I was washing charcoal over it, I was actually using my rubber to create a lot of the highlights. So a lot of the highlights you can see on the forehead and over the cheeks and the nose, etc., are actually the grayness of the paper, but because of the charcoal around it, they appear a lot lighter. So some of the where I start to use a white chalk pencil around, say, some of the really highlighted spots, say on her, you can see it there on the necklace, and her earrings, and the tiara that she's been wearing a lot recently. There, they're really punched out through the image that I was working on, and I knew they had to be the lightest. So I knew that the contrast between the lightest part that I have here on the forehead, another stage lighter than that would be the white of the chalk pencil. So I couldn't have the white of the chalk pencil here on the grey tone paper because it would bleach itself out, so it would not have a stronger light on it. So if you think about light and darkness, where you often assume that, oh, this is white because it's the lightest bit, it's not necessarily white you need to go to. Sometimes your lightest part on the face isn't white. So I mean, even if you look at my face right now in the bottom left hand corner, there's nothing really white on my face. Although if you're going to represent it on a white page with charcoal, etc., you might think that, oh, I have to leave that area white as the page, but it might be too strong a light, and you might just need a very subtle tone of graphite or charcoal over that, or even if you're painting a very, very light wash of a colour as a background, to build your colours upon, or to build your tone upon, to create the illusion of a three-dimensional form. So I've picked something that's quite dramatic. There's quite a strong contrast between lights and darks on there. Guys, if you've got any questions, ask away. This is the time to do it. Hopefully some more people will join as we go along. Normally, I know it's been a little bit harder for some people to jump on board at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but the reason why this was moved, originally I was doing it at 11 AM on Saturday morning. The reason why I moved it to 2 o'clock is because we did actually have 1 week where the live classes started again, but then they were cancelled because there was another lockdown. One of those things. So I just left it at 2 o'clock to save shifting it around, but I did find that some people couldn't actually get to it. So I'm going to work predominantly in charcoals today, just because I found it's a little bit quicker medium to do the demonstrations in rather than the pencil. Sometimes pencils take a little bit more time because they're lighter and you build them up. I just feel so I build them up with a lot more sensitivity. So this is a little bit more graphic in its application because there's such a strong bold marks between places. But I think there's still an awful lot we can do to get some of those images down. Now the image that I have got on screen, there's a big streak on the, let's see, I can't actually show you, maybe with this pencil on the bottom here, where, well, so I'll move it that way, nope, this way. Okay, there. You can see you see that pencil just there. On this right hand bottom side, there's like a light streak which goes right the way up to the top over here. Where is it? Pencil's disappeared. That was shot. Oh, there we are. To there. That's because when I was taking a photograph, there was a bit of a sheen on the page, so that doesn't actually exist in the photograph, but it still creates like a lovely ghostly image. There's another element sometimes you find a happy accident which almost looks like a sunbeam in front of the portrait, which creates an extra illusion of depth, so I might leave that in. I'm working, say, predominantly in charcoal. I'm using General's pencils. I'm going to start off with you can get hard, medium and soft, and extra soft in these charcoal pencils. They're a great consistency. They're lovely to work with. I'll put links to these up as well. I'll also be working in Pan Pastel, which is just a pastel medium. They're like little compacted cakes of pastel in these brilliant little tubs. And I'll be using my little palette. It's like, it looks like a palette knife with these little rubber ends on the end, like a foam, not rubber, like a little foam covers. And I just find it really easy to block big marks in when I'm setting up the composition of this. Now, obviously, there's certain elements of this which is bright white. Now you could use chalk later on, or you could use the whiteness of the page to create that. So I know, looking at that, what I might do is just shrink that image down just a wee tad so you can see more of the page. Unfortunately, you might see more of my face, but I'll try and cover it up as best as I can for you. There we are. So this is the top of my page, you can see up here, and the bottom of my page is down here. So I know that my image needs to fit within this space. Now I know that seems obvious, but starting off, we often just get stuck straight in and go, right, portrait is here. And by the time we put the head in, and we realize we haven't left enough space for the shoulder. So positioning to begin with can kind of help you. So you can visually look at your image and try and visually see it on your page. If you flick from what you're looking at to the page, if you do it quickly enough, there's almost like a ghost image left on your, visually left on your white page. So you can check, does your marks need to move up, down, left or right? It's not to say you get the placement perfect to begin with. This is just a place to get you started. So often when people say, how do you start your pictures or your portraits? I never know where to start. This is how I start. Now whether the person's sitting in front of me, I do the same, or if I'm working from an image, I do the same thing. I'm looking for the actual image in the book so I can use it from life. There we are. So I've got the image there in front of me. So I'll be looking basically from the image to the page to try and get those elements down relatively easy. Now I always have the image in front of me and my surface in the same place, so it's on a vertical. I don't tend to work on a flat because I tend to feel that my portraits end up looking like they've been elongated, and that's just because of the perspective that I'm looking at the drawing page. So it just makes it easier that I don't necessarily have to move my head. I can start to plan out loosely where this image is going to go. And what I'm looking at now is just where the top of his head is. I'm looking for the big shapes. You know, this angle comes down at the side of his head. You know, how far does that come down? It's a bit of a back of his collar that comes out. There's another bit just in there which comes out, and then it comes down from his, it looks like a smock he's wearing. When I saw this image, it reminds me of an artist I really like called Odd Nerdrum. That's Oddnerdum. Check him out. But visually it looks like the same. I think he's a Norwegian artist, and he's quite famous in Norway, and he's got a wonderful kind of romanticized persona. When you see him, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it just visually, this picture just visually reminded me of him. I'm looking for shapes and images. So already I've got like the back of his head. I think we can quite see that on the camera. Then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can kind of see the marks there coming down. This will develop as we chat along. So if you've got any questions at the moment, do ask. Say if I'm not too sure where things are going, I can move them around a little bit. I think this chin line is good because it is almost down the halfway of the page, maybe just above it. Yeah, it's just above it, so I'll move that up a bit. But I think it's almost centered, maybe over to the left a little bit as a line. From there is his chin, which comes out at an angle. Now you can measure this with a bit of string and move the diagonal of the string across to your page and then draw it down, or you can use your pencil to align it with the angle of his chin and move that to your image on your page, and then use another pencil to draw a line, just to help you visually see the angles. We're not worried about details. We're literally looking at form, the form and structure of the head, the big volume shapes. So at the minute, it's the big volume shapes of his head. You know, elements like his hairline that pops out here can create a lovely arc that comes across the top there, and it almost comes down to a point here, and then it flicks out. But if you go along from that bit where it flicks out from his hair and comes straight across, you get almost the top of his eyebrow ridge. Now it doesn't go straight; it's slightly angled. So I'm going to put that as a little guideline, and I'm drawing lightly because I know that I'm going to have to shift things around a little bit. I'm looking at how it looks like it goes straight down. It's slightly angled, but the side of his face, can you see that, is almost a straight line. There's very little contouring around on this image of this person, very little contouring around an element of his eye and his cheek and his jaw. If you look at that just as a shape, it's quite straight. Now, if we were drawing it from our imagination, or if we're not really paying attention to what we're looking at, often what can happen is we assume it's curved, or we start drawing all these curves and bumps in, or we accentuate what we think is there. So we might think, oh, here comes this cheek, I'll draw a cheek because I drew a cheek like that last time in the last portrait. You've got to look at the image in front of you, because often what we assume things look like, they don't actually physically look like in real life. As I say, we are copying an artwork here, we're not copying from a photograph of a person, so there might be certain elements even within this photograph which are different from the actual person, but we can use this image to help us kind of work out some of our ideas, what we want to try and create. So when I start to look at this now, if I ended the chin here, I can't have it coming out this far because it just seems too wide for his face. I'm kind of looking at it as a rectangle. If I took that line straight up and straight across, what sort of rectangle would that give me? When I look at his face down here into the side of his face, if I go straight up from his chin beard here and go straight up, actually come out to the top of his that right eye on the right hand side, can you see that? The connection between that part of his chin and where his eyebrow is are in this kind of a straight line. Because this angles out a little bit, it looks like it's slightly more of a trapeze shape, but in a straight line going from there straight up, I should come to where his eyebrow is. So that's let me know that this line stops here, and from that, this line doesn't join it, it's slightly above it, so I can move that as well. So I'll bring this line up. How far it comes out, I can judge that as well. I can create a triangle from that point. If I go straight up, almost to the same point, and come straight down, well, not straight down, if I go with a slight angle, that's the angle I'm looking at, I get to where the back of his ear is. There's a straight point there, and then this point comes down. Doesn't quite join, it's about there for the back of his the back part of his jaw, just underneath his ear. So we're starting to block areas out in this portrait already, which is starting to give us a head shape. Now there's lots of angles in here which you can play around with. There's the angle of his eye, that's the top part of his eyebrow, and it comes out and then it comes down. And I can start to see how some of these points that I've already got are really helpful to sort of use them as anchor points in which to place other shapes. So you kind of look for the big shapes and break down to the small shapes, and the small shapes you can refine. But I've not gone into detail. It's important not to jump to detail, because we're always wanting to jump into the juicy part of drawing where the eyes are. If we don't know where the head shape is, it's very hard to draw where the eyes are. I think we mentioned that before, didn't we, Alex? So where do you place the eyes? We've got to draw the head first. I know it sounds obvious, but it's not until we look at some of the obvious and simple things which sound easy, and they actually are easy. They're very obviously, but they become obvious to us when you become aware of them. But if you've been drawing faces for a while, or trying to draw faces for a while, sometimes having the obvious simple things pointed out are a great key to improving your artwork. And they only become simple and obvious once you know about them. You know, before that, it seems quite complex, but when you break it down, it becomes slightly more palatable for you to be able to try it out, because you've got some structure there in which to help you. And on top of that, you can start to add your artistic flair. This is just the basics of how you're placing in proportions, and how do you get certain textures and feelings and try to play with the emotion side of doing portraits and all those good things that we want to kind of push our artwork for. Now there's kind of like a hunger to try and get to that bit first without necessarily understanding this bit of laying out and working things out where they are, you know, whereabouts would his eye go, where that shape that I'm working on here is the shape of the shadow shape of where his eyes are. This gives me a good place to understand where his nose is. There's a lovely little kind of curve that goes in there, and then it comes down to a straight line. And what I'm drawing is I can also draw the negative shape. So rather than drawing a shadow, I'm drawing this negative highlight shape in between. It kind of looks like a mountain of Mount Everest or something like that. Can you see this shape? If I zoom in, maybe point this out a little bit better. I'll move the camera up a wee bit. Yep. So that kind of mountain shape that I'm talking about, I'm not necessarily drawing the shadow shapes, I'm drawing a negative space in between them. I'm trying to get that shape right. I'm going for the shapes of things rather than the detail. And then what will help you do, as you go through the drawing, doing all these little elements and pulling them together, everything starts to have a relationship with each other. You know, this nose has a relationship to this eye has a relationship to that chin, the chin has a relationship to the size of the head, and they start to stay in proportions with each other because you're looking at how each element fits together rather than drawing each little element individually and then hoping for the best that they all somehow coalesce and stay together. I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls to starting off drawing. Some people can draw eyes amazingly but freak out because they can't draw mouths, and it's not the fact they can't draw mouths, because if they can draw an eye perfectly, they can draw the mouth perfectly. It's no different. We attach a fear to elements of the face because we think we can't draw them. What we're doing is overcomplicating it. What we need to do is take a couple of steps back and go, where does it start? Where does it stop? You know, maybe it's the mouth. How wide is the mouth? You know, how big is the mouth structure between one lip and the other lip? Where does it fit on the space? How does that relate to the side of the head or a mark, you know, that's in the shadow? How far away is it on the picture itself? If it helps you place them, you know the area in which to work in. You then know how long the line needs to be. If we're paying attention to what we're actually looking at rather than assuming there's a top lip and a bottom lip, look at your image, because when we look at this image, you can't necessarily see too much information about where certain structures are. There's a lovely kind of M-shaped line which we'll come to in a bit, which is kind of broken, but it gives the impression of where the two lips meet. You can't see his top lip, he's got a beard, but you can't actually quite see his bottom lip either, and you can't see a line that goes around it. Often we see that kind of Betty Boo shape of that kind of M shape at the top and a big curve underneath for the top lip and bottom lip, and very seldom do they exist in portraiture that we actually look at. We look at people's faces, unless they're using a very pronounced lip liner on their face, do they actually have that shape? So we might think of an image of Marilyn Monroe and she might have that shape, which is fine if you're doing a picture of Marilyn Monroe. If you're doing a picture of your auntie, say for example, and she's sort of drinking a cup of tea, you might not see both of those lips, but we have an association of simplification in our heads. It's almost like a memory of what lips are, but it doesn't actually appear in reality. And if you wanted to put those lips on, she might look like she's trying to be Marilyn Monroe. So you've got to think, what am I looking at? What can I actually see here of this image, rather than associate it with being a stylized lip. If your work is moving in a stylized direction, that a lot of the elements in your portraiture has a characterization of a certain visual trope. So we're going to use Marilyn Monroe's Betty Boo lips. That every person has this kind of element to them. It may be a stylized reason to do that. Afternoon, Angela. How are you doing? Yeah, I still can get it right. Yeah, you can get it right. Yeah, well, I mean you can get it right. I know you put cannot get it. I'm going to say you can get it right. So what I want you to try and maybe look at is, wherever it's not right, what is not right about it? So when you're drawing, it might be an element that you know that you're going to get wrong, so you draw it lightly, but you can start to place down, okay, well, how far away is it from other things? Is it the positioning that you don't get quite right? Is it that you're assuming what you think a lip looks like and you're putting it down? Look to the image. Use your image as your guide. I'm using this photographic reference, but when it comes down to drawing your pictures of the people that you want to draw, or the elements that you want to draw, say if it's a tree and a landscape, what does that tree actually look like, rather than in your mind's eye what you think a tree looks like, because often they're seldomly different. There's very many different versions of species of trees, so if you're drawing constantly, you're drawing the idealized version of what an oak tree looks like, but you're looking at a landscape filled with conifers, none of your trees are going to look right. So it's how to get those things. I can't even get reason the grid. Well, it might be the fact that the grid might be tripping you up, because the grid feels like a bit of a like a crux that you can lean on. The grid's there to help me place these things, but if you don't use the grid in the same way that we'd use the whole picture page, you're still going to make errors in each individual grid, which then exacerbates the problem, because you start to associate, well, I've used the grid, it must be me. But if you've not used the process well, the grid isn't the problem. The grid's actually the trap, because you're associating, well, I've used the grid, it must be right. Use your eye. Start to trust your eye and train your eye to see where marks are in relationship to each other. So I just zoomed in there to do a little bit of that nose that we were talking about. So we'll get this lovely, it does look a little bit like Everest. I always try and make a visual associations about the shapes, so I draw that, but I can see the shape, and I start to forget it's a nose and a face of a man that I'm drawing. Zoom it out back this way a little bit. So guys, how have you been? What is it you're working on at the minute? Angela, good to see you again, and thanks for your messages on Instagram. It was lovely to kind of see people kind of like little bits of support. It kind of boosts your kind of your ego a little bit. It is, but it just makes you feel a little bit better when people are going, "Oh, we love your pictures." Like, how good it makes a connection. That's ultimately what we want as artists, is the artwork to visually mean something to somebody. I don't know if you popped in later, Andrew. I popped up the little time lapse of the Floella Benjamin portrait that I did, but I'm sure you've seen that already on Instagram. So yeah, it'd be interesting to find out what you're working on. It's good to share that you're having a problem doing something, because I dare say everybody's in the same boat. I was looking at the portrait I did last week, and I was looking at it this morning and went, that shoulder's in the wrong place. And I'm here giving little demonstrations and chats. I get things wrong. So if I get things wrong, be easy on yourself. It's okay that you're developing and you're progressing. But this is why I kind of reiterate a lot of the same points as we go through the drawing. Part of using the grid is that your grid on your image should be the same proportions as your grid on your page. Now that sounds obvious, but often I find that people have drawn a quick grid out over their image, and then when they blow it up to the size of the page, it's just slightly different, and therefore the grids then don't work. Because if you go two grids across, one grid down, this line goes from here to like bottom left hand corner to top right hand corner, you do the same on your grid that's different to this one, your proportions are going to be all over the place. But because you're using the grid, you start to rely on the grid answering all of your issues, rather than starting to visually train your eye. A grid is a great way, if you're using it well, to map things out really quickly. But it's not about speed. If you take your time to go through this process and you really look at it, it might take you longer to really use this process to begin with, but as you get used to it, it naturally becomes quicker, because you start to really trust visually what you're checking things against, how far away from one thing is and away from another, how far, for example, the angle of his shoulder coming out to create this mark that comes down this way from his cheek doesn't start at the bottom of his chin. Bottom of his chin is actually, if we have a look at that line, it comes in sort of that way, and then it's not quite in line. There's a bit of a shadow space here, coming up this way, and then there's the side of his face this way, and it's like it almost looks like a 90-degree angle. It's slightly more than that. So I'm going to bring my pencil up against the angle of his shoulder and move that to my page. So I haven't moved the angle of my pencil. I've literally put the angle of my pencil on the image, and I've moved it straight up because I've got my drawing page on the same plane as my drawing image, and I can start to visually see that line comes out there. Now I can't bring it out to here, it's too far. I know it stops a little bit closer to his head, but what I can do is I could take an imaginary point on that line that I've got so far and just play with, if that was a triangle, is that the same triangle that I would find on my drawing? You know, I can even put an imaginary light pencil angle between the point where it becomes his eyebrow and the point where the first point over his shoulder is. I can create that and move that up, and I get to see that it's in a little bit closer than I've got it. But I think that's the point there, and then from that point his shoulder comes out, and I start to get a format then of proportions that is going to be slightly more accurate than if I just guess without checking, assume where things are. Or I'll shift it later, and then later on you kind of forget because you've got stuck into doing a lovely rendering of a face or an eye, you know, the juicy part of the portrait. But the structural elements are about where his shoulders are, and where I put these marks initially, I can actually move them. If this is the place where the back of his jaw is, I can start to suggest now how far out, you know, this back of his head is, you know, and I can see from there that where I've had this mark initially for the back of his shoulder, it's actually further up. I can kind of see it's that way, and it actually angles down a little bit before it comes to the point of where his top starts, and how far that kind of swings in. You can see I'm kind of like ghosting the image first. Let's zoom out a little bit more. Out that way. That's it. Yeah, if I ghost that image, I can kind of visually see my hand in relationship to other marks on my page and start to go, okay, that is about there, that's right. So this is about that far away. And I'm checking the shape rather than the line. I'm checking the shape of this against what I can physically see on the image of the book, that this is a stronger line there. So I'm going to put that stronger line in. It disappears into his neck, so I'm not going to necessarily make it as dark all the way through, but I know it comes in past this point, the edge of his chin. It comes in a little bit underneath his chin, and it kind of makes his neck like it's leaning forward a little bit. And when you look at the image, it looks like it's a very strong image and he's looking forward. What I often do is try and take on the physicalities of the thing that I'm drawing, which sounds weird, but if you can strain, you start to feel where your neck and head muscles are leaning forward, shoulders are going back, or shoulders are hunched, or you know, how he's looking up. You can add those elements in. Now, I'm not saying you have to pretend to be a tree if you're drawing a landscape, but you might get a certain feel for a tree, that it might be slightly crusty and angular and ripped and that type of thing. If you get into the mindset of the thing that you're drawing, it becomes easier as well. Excuse me. It's a kind of visual performance rather than it is an acting performance, so you're not necessarily worried about getting an Oscar, but it's a visual thinking that will train the sensitivity in what it is you're trying to achieve with your pencils or paints or whatever. I'm looking at the line that comes up here as well. Halfway up, between here and here, halfway up, is actually a lovely point where his cheek is. And there's a little tiny triangle just there, which if you carry it all the way through is like a little bit of an arc, but from about this point, about a third almost between there and there, is the point where his beard comes out, and it creates a lovely triangle, and it gets up to the same point and then it moves direction. So I can check, yeah, maybe that's not, maybe it's about there. Change direction. I can use my pencil in which to plan these shapes a little bit. That might be too long for the moment. I think it stops probably about there. What it's doing is just help me find where his nose is, this bottom part of his nose. I'm going to suggest it's about there at the moment. There's a lovely shape, shadow shape underneath his nose. The shadow shapes can be just as important as the actual things themselves, like noses and eyes and ears. Shadow shapes are what say a cast shadow, where light is quite strong and it's hitting his nose and it's creating a lovely shadow just underneath his nose, which is cast over the shape of his mouth. I can use these shadow shapes and they can really help you find structures and not just the form but the actual physicality of his face as well. You know, if I take this line and go straight through his nose, and then I take another angle which is the angle of the side of his mouth on the other side, I'm going to take the angle of the image and move it to my page and start to see that it comes down this way. It creates like a triangle shape. Now none of this is going to exist in the drawing, but what I do, or what I can use, is the width. Kind of comes up this way for the other side of his cheek, which helps me then find out where. I think that's a little bit too far over still. Yeah, it is. And the reason why I've done just check that is I looked at that point on his eyebrow. Now if I look straight down, I don't hit the corner of his beard, you know, where it goes from the corner of his nose to the corner of the top part of his mustache part of his beard. I don't hit that if that's at an angle, so it means that this line stops there, but it's further down below his nose. So I know that this line here that I've got needs to come down here a little bit more. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move that line in a bit. I always try and make associations and connections. So if this doesn't quite line up, move it a little bit. What needs to move? Maybe the whole line needs to move. I double check it first. I can just check against other things. I can check how the distance between, say, the point that I'm about to make here, where the top part of his mustache beard is, from his shoulder. Now, what does that look like? Does that look like it's in line? If not, does it need to be more shallow? Does it come down a bit further? I think it's about there. I can make a little mark rather than drawing a very definite line. But all of this is about placement of things. It's quite architectural and structural. Literally building the scaffolding of the drawing. We haven't started to fill it in yet. You know, to give it a certain solidity. I want to make sure that I'm not going to waste time doing lovely shading and figuring out, oh, hang on a second, that's in the wrong place. So just taking this extra time actually saves you time in the long run. I like how things connect to each other rather than just randomly doing something different. I like to see how one thing will then move on to the next thing. So if I go back to where we had his eye up here, and I can look at elements and shapes that I've got going on in the drawing. I'm looking at triangles and things, so that line comes all the way up here. That line going all the way up there gives me the edge of where his eye is. The top part of his eyelid coming down this way, in between that line, comes out that way, continues all the way past this line, there is a bit of a shadow that comes up this way. There's definitely a shadow that comes down from this point. Oh, it's there. So I'm still working out some of these structures of where his eye is on this side, but there's a lovely kind of set of upside down triangles, or you could look at the negative space and just draw this one, but how that comes in close to this nose, and if it's there as a point, it might mean that this line comes down a bit further, and this is actually a bigger curve than I had it originally. So again, these can look quite abstract marks I'm putting on, but as you start to flick between the image and the drawing, the image and the drawing, you can start to see the relationship of them. They're not about details of eyes, they're not about getting the pupil in the right place. It's getting the positioning of these shapes in relationship to where his nose is, because he's got quite a Roman looking nose that comes down, it kind of comes down out here and then straightish down to this point. This point here might need to move back a bit. Yeah, so that is the point there. As it comes down, that's that point, which means that then that becomes there. So it has a knock-on effect to other marks I've put in. I might be drawing this a little bit harder than I would do normally, purely so you can see it on the screen, but it has a knock-on effect to the other marks that had. Now there's only a slight difference between the two. We're talking millimeters, but it's important to move in those millimeters, because the additional other things that are wrong in millimeters and other things become centimeter then differences, and then centimeter differences then become inches difference, and those are the things that when we look at a portrait we go, how does this not look like the image that we're looking at? Why has it moved so much? Why does it look like his jaw is like Desperate Dan's, you know, is out here somewhere when it's almost straight? Why didn't I put it straight? So you can recheck against other elements. So if this moves, that might move in and out, which might mean this moves in and out, which might mean this moves in and out. Keep moving them until they start to coalesce and settle. As they do kind of coalesce and settle into one place, you know that your image, proportion wise, is right. Oh goodly, I'm doing my homework whilst listening to you. Good. You're much more interested. Oh, thank you. Yeah, what homework are you doing? Good to see that you do homework as well. I often do other things and listen to art podcasts at the same time as well, because I think it's just subconsciously it kind of trickles in, and it pops up when you are actually doing the portrait. And if you kind of listen to things over and over and repetitive, they become more like a mantra in your own head rather than having to play somebody else to help you do something. It sticks in your own head, so it can be useful that way as well. Yeah, so that's good. Well, what are you studying at the moment? Yeah, so I looked at his nose coming down here. Now, I think this is too low down. I think it needs to move up a little bit. So not only have I got it in the wrong place, I've got it, as in I put the marks down here and did all the angles and things, I think it's just a little bit too low down, so I'm not going to be afraid to move it, because I'm looking at a relationship to this point here on the nose, in relationship to the scale of this shadow shape, because I worked out this shadow shape. And I don't want to work in isolation in bits, I want to pull these things together. So when I look at this as a part of his nose, it comes down to a point in space, I think about there, and it's at that point, which is almost in line with the center part of his cheek here, and it's at that point his nose comes out this way and kind of comes down this way. So I'm actually going to rub these areas out. It's alright if you need to rub them out, it's part of it. I'm painting the eyes and nose of a female face. Oh, okay. and try to learn the contour and the structure of the eyes and the nose, painting each layer, stage, step. Oh, cool. It's time consuming. It is, but it's not about speed. Take your time with it. Just enjoy the process of it, and it'll stay with you. And obviously, the next time you go to approach to doing an eyes and nose, and you've understood those structures, the elements of how an eyelid fits around an eyeball, and how the eyeball fits inside a skull eye socket, and how that kind of folds work. When you approach a different face, those structural elements will help you understand what you're actually looking at. And I think it's like I've mentioned this before, it's like driving a car. You don't know what a clutch is until you're told what a clutch is. Then you become very aware of the clutch. Every time you use a clutch, you have to go through a mechanical process of going, oh, push my foot in on the clutch, grab hold of the gear stick and push that into first gear, because first gear is over there. You have to think about it. But as you get used to it, you start to automatically do these things because you know where they are. So you start to learn what the structures of eyes and noses and mouths are. But what you actually physically can then spend your time looking at is, well, how does a specific face have a specific structure to it, which creates a demand to represent the face in a specific way. So how does light fall on the face? So this is a great example of that. How light is falling on this person's face that I've got as an image is very dramatic, and it's creating very structural elements to his shadow of where his eye is. But his eyes will have the same structures as yours on the face that you're looking at. It'll have a certain rule-based system about what does an eye actually contain. Now, some of those things you won't be able to see in this portrait, but if you understand the structural layout of them, it really helps you to play around with the shadow shapes, and why these shadow shapes are doing certain things. You know, structurally, why are they doing? Why is it going over this way from this part of his nose? Because there's a central part of his eyebrow ridge which is very thin, and he's got one of these lovely bones which stick out, create like that Roman nose. There's a line that comes down the other side of it here, which is almost mirroring this line, and it creates a lovely channel coming straight down here, creating the tip of his nose. Now, the tip of his nose is not the under part of his nose, it's the bit that's closest to you. That's the tip. And then in this case, it creates a lovely light triangle shape, which brings it across to here. There's a slight arc where it becomes his nostril. So you can put that nostril in, because it sort of veers off from this mark that we have. And then it comes straight down here, which creates a channel between these two things. And this curve that we can see, now this is a curved shadow, it's not a curved nostril. It's a curved shadow that comes underneath his nose. It just really helps me see how far it is away from this point of his nose coming out this way, which, as I said before, creates a line that comes down this way. But I've got two other sets of lines here which are becoming confusing. If they're really getting in the way and they're really starting to confuse me, I can get rid of them and I can rub them out. And the reason why I can do that is because I drew it in lightly, which is great. Getting rid of something isn't the, you know, people often say, oh, to leave all of your structural marks in, because that's what makes a drawing. Now, that's a visual style. If you're working out the drawing, the lines are just in the wrong place and they're distracting, get rid of them. It doesn't help your drawing later on. It actually becomes a roadblock for you to actually lay the image down. Get rid of it. There is merit in sometimes leaving marks in there that were wrong, because I think I can add a certain flavour to artworks. But if something is visually getting in the way, get rid of it, because it'll hinder you all the way through your drawing process. So I'm starting to put this mark in that I had before, twice in the wrong place. Now it's in the right place. I'm starting to get a feeling that this is where this nose goes a lot better. Maybe this comes out a little bit further there. So I get a sense of where his nose goes. Now you can see I'm not drawing this line in strongly all the way through, because on my image there is no dark line running down the side of his nose. What it is a shadow shape which gives the illusion of the rest of his nose, and we can come to that at a later stage. So I'm only drawing the visual structural things that I can see, not what I think I can see. I'm not putting in marks and lines where they don't exist. You know, if you're being expressive and loose about these things, you might have a line that kind of drifts through, but you'll have dark areas and light areas of the same contour. So in this case, I've got a dark area here where it's contrasting with the darkness of the shadow of his eye socket and where his eyeball is, and I have a little touch of a shadow here, a darker line here where the shadow is underneath his nose, and it has actually sort of an element of the other nostril on the other side of his nose. In between it, it's a really subtle line, light line, if you want to put anything at all. I'm just kind of leave it. Where's the question you are replying to? Oh no, I asked the question, Alex. I asked what Angela was working on for homework. So she's working on you're doing a painting course online, is that right? Are you actually going to sort of is that a physical college or university that you're going to? You can share with us as well. If you're doing a course online, it's always great to share sort of the resources, so other people might want to have a go at doing that as well. I'm always up for people going off to other tutors and checking them out. So yeah, am I missing something here somehow? No, I don't think so. I was just talking about different eye shadows and stuff with Angela there, so it might have been that you were looking at my drawing and not hearing what we were chatting about, but that's all. You haven't missed anything. I'm still talking about the same thing. It's all about line and shadows and shapes. So yeah, I've got the line coming out from the cheek here. It comes down, creates a shadow line of the under part of his cheek, and if I carry that line through, I get to the same point where that line changed. So it changes now this way. So again, where I've moved these lines, this line will have to change as well. So I can take my rubber and just rub that back. The benefit of drawing lightly is when you rub it out, you're not too expert on YouTube or doing most of this stuff. No, it's a big learning curve for everybody. I think if you watch any podcast that's out there at the minute, everybody has a technical issue somewhere along the line. It is a live little beastie of things that don't work quite well and constantly move around a bit. So you think, yeah, I've got everything set up this week. All my settings are perfectly the same as last week. It should be totally fine. You start it all off and nothing works. You have to reboot your computer and switch it on and off again, and switch cameras around and all that type of thing. I'm sure Alex, you were trying to help me out for ages with my camera that kept switching off, and it was a software thing that I just could not control. It was something way out of my parameters, and to the point where I had to get a new camera. Thankfully, I don't have to switch this camera on and off, which is so much more conducive to doing an art broadcast. So yeah, where was it? This line. So I've rubbed that one out. It means this one moves back a bit. Already we can start to see where we're getting elements of where eyes are, where the nose is. Now I would say I haven't drawn an eyes, nose and mouth, but we're starting to see eyes, nose and mouth. That's the funniest thing. When we think we are drawing things like we know what an eye looks like, an eye looks like an almond, it never does. Occasionally it does, but most of the time it doesn't, because the type of shadows that we can see give you the structure and give you the expressiveness of the face, and those elements fitting together with the structural elements of what we know to be obviously two eyes in a skull and on a nose and on a mouth. They kind of have a balance, a play with each other, so you're looking at the expressive nature and quality of the marks that you're making with your paintbrush or your pencils to give you the impression of what an eye structure looks like, but you have to draw the eye structure that you are looking at. which is different from the next face that you draw. They'll have the similar positions. You know, if you go back to the eyes are, if I look at the camera straight on, the eyes are in between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. That works until you start doing that. Then you work. If you went, okay, visually now that's the top of my head and that's the bottom of my chin. If I put the eyes in the middle, they'll be where my hat is, not where my eyes are. So you've got to think, what is the face? What's the face and the head that I'm looking at? Where is the angle sitting? Because if I followed the same rules over and over again and put it on every face, it wouldn't work, because we all carry our head slightly differently. Sometimes it gives it an element of character, how our body language can explain it is a certain person, how certain people sit. So if you think of, say for example, if you're doing a portrait of Stephen Hawking where his head would always be linked to one side, that might be down to his condition, but his head leaning to one side gave a part of his portrait, gave a part of what he looks like. If you think of Lady Diana, how she would coyly sit to one side. If you started doing her like this guy, who's leaning forward into the light, you know, full of vigor and vitality and, you know, expressiveness, that wouldn't necessarily, if you're trying to tell a pictorial story of Lady Diana, it wouldn't fit. So sometimes physicality can tell you personality as well. Something to look out for. If you're trying to depict somebody deep in thought, you know, rather than going to the cheesy comic element of somebody in thought, it might be that person in thought. How do they look? How do they carry themselves physically? What are they doing with their head? Is their head angled to their body? Is this on chat? You're in my chat bar. No, what I've been talking about? No, it was popped up. I think she posted a thing saying that Angela was painting eyes. Is this what we were talking about, Alex? I've just gone off on a tangent from this about, you know, physicality, about how you physically look at somebody. If we apply what's in textbooks as proportions of a face to every face we look at, it doesn't work, because the faces that we look at are at different proportions and different angles. Often when we do a head that is like this, at a 3/4 angle, and it's slightly looking away from us, if we have learned how to draw the face looking straight on and apply those rules, because that is a face and how you draw a face, to a face that is 3/4, it doesn't work, because the angles are slightly different. If you don't move them to be what you physically see in front of you, it's where things will trip you up a little bit. If you go, our eyes are in the middle of the head, that's where the eyes go, and you're definite about that because that's what the book's told you, but you realise that because he's got his head turned, the angle of these eyes is not going to be straight, it's going to be angled, because what goes away from you gets smaller. So his head, as it goes away from you, gets smaller a little bit and creates the illusion of the angle. You know, the direction of his face is looking out that way, not looking straight forward towards you that way. Does that make sense? So his head is facing up this way. That side of his head is going to visually appear smaller than this side of his head, because this is closest to you and that's further away, and as things go further away they get smaller. Did Angela ask a question or comment on chat? Angela commented on chat. Maybe you didn't see that bit. I don't know if it's scrolled up or not. It'll probably pop up after. You know, I've noticed something with YouTube and Facebook. Sometimes I can't access the chat straight away after it's finished. It seems to take time to upload itself, however ethereally, through the airwaves, whatever it is. I know I do the live broadcast, but then it takes a little while for it to kind of arrive at YouTube. So sometimes it's been an hour, sometimes it's been immediate, sometimes it's been a lot longer, that I can't access it to update the information. So I didn't do last week's information regarding this book, and they used as a reference. I will do. So it might be the case of you haven't seen Angela's chat yet because it hasn't come up. I don't know. Sometimes I can see it on my end. That's the important thing, because we can talk about it. So yeah, So Angela was just saying she was painting the eyes and nose of a female face, trying to learn the contour and structure of eyes and nose, painting each layer at each stage, and it was time consuming, but she was learning a lot. So yeah. How is everybody using chat? Angela's using chat. We had a little hi right at the very beginning. I think there's only a couple of us here today. Draw mode said hello. So we've got 3 viewers. It might be just me and you at the moment. Somebody else might have dropped out. It might be you, me, and Angela. So it's hard to tell. Sometimes chat works for people. Sometimes their internet service drops out. A whole number of different reasons. If you watch Sky Portrait Artist of the Year on a Sunday, you'll see everybody has the same problem. When it starts, people are going, my screen's still blank, I can't see anything. And it was sort of the thing that started and they haven't refreshed their page or something. So there's always like technical questions happening through the program, going, why is my screen gone blank? I can't hear anything. And all these different questions kind of follow. It's just a part of the process, and rather than worry about it, I just kind of like let that kind of play through. Take us away from doing the portrait though. So yeah, I'm going to do some bigger marks. I don't want to get sucked down into the nitty gritty of where nostrils are at this point, because I haven't figured out where certain elements are, like the edge of his beard for his chin and that type of thing. So I think when I come down from this point, coming out this way, is his beard. So I'm following the edge of this part of his beard. It doesn't come right down to the end point here. It kind of comes in from this point here up to create sort of this triangle shape. And this triangle shape's quite good as well, because it brings me closer to the edge of where this eye is. This eye might move down here a little bit more in relationship to where that nose line is across that way. If I move that across this way, I get to where the edge of his beard is on this side. There's like a wonderful W shape. This one's in the more of the shadows. I'll draw it in lightly, and it creates this kind of weird trapeze shape here, but it's like this W shape above it, which helps me. As it gets to the top here, it goes off an angle this direction, and there's a wonderful line which is, it's not that far out. Move that line back a bit. It's a wonderful line just below it, just about here. This one comes up. So I'm purposely going a little bit slower today with my image. I think this mark is further over this way. Which helps me figure out where this mark goes. If this is his cheek and the point I'm looking at here, this mark is a lot lower down. Further out. You know, there's a mark here that I've got, and it's further out here, which widens the width of this whole shadow shape. But in the context of this portrait, see, this line is actually here, and this line, and it comes out. And this will have a knock-on effect of other things in my drawing. It's further out than I had it there. This line actually comes down this way to a point. There, and it comes across from his cheek. That way. So you can see that that's the line I had originally. This is the line I've now got. You don't see any else's chat. Anthony, I love you. That's lovely, Ingrid. I can see the chat. It might just be you and me. Can see there's 3 viewers at the moment, so a lot of people watch this later on, and if you are watching this later on, hello. You can still leave a little comment in the comments below the chat window. You can still subscribe to this if you haven't subscribed. You can get this, so you can get a notification that this is going live. So if you forget, you need a little reminder that way. You can share it with other people on your social media pages if you know of other people who like portraiture and drawing and having a general art chat as well. Good discussion this week. I don't know if anybody saw the Maggie Hambling sculpture. I chatted about it with earlier with somebody, and it was her representation of a leading suffragette lady who was fighting for women's rights, and her sculpture of it. And people waited a long time to get the sculpture, and when it arrived, people got very annoyed with it. And yes, there's always a thing about controversiality of a sculpture and how it can still bring the issue forward, and people are talking about it. So in one way, yes, it's good, but whether it makes a connection with the person the sculpture is about. So I don't know if anybody saw that. I can see what Maggie Hambling was trying to do. I don't think she was successful. I don't agree with how she used the figurative element in her artwork, because it kind of goes against the grain or the ethos of what she did, and I think it kind of got lost. It feels a little bit like oh, you're having to give up on Sky Portrait Artists, yeah, on Sundays. Oh, don't give up. It's a case of like, just watch it back when you've got a better connectivity, I think. Sometimes it can be that other people are using the same broadband. We have the same problem here. 3 4 people like us are in the house. There's only 3 of us. Cat's not using it. But if we're all using the internet, and say for example, Cal's streaming a movie and Andrea's streaming a movie, and I'm trying to broadcast live, it can slow the internet down. So if there's more people using the internet, it can slow that way. In general, broadband in your area can be quite slow. You can do a thing on your computer where you can check the speed of your internet, and if it's way out of what you should be getting from your provider, give them a call. They might set out a new set-top box, or something like that. That might help. But yeah, don't give up on Sundays. There's always a thing where you can watch it live as well on Sky TV, on the Sky Arts channel. About sort of halfway through, about an hour before the end. So as it starts at 10 o'clock, so 11, 12, 1, about 1 o'clock on a Sunday. You can watch it live on TV, so you can catch up for the last hour. But it's up all week on Facebook. So it's kind of good to kind of listen to the portrait on that. Yeah, so it took me away from what I was talking about. I moved things around a bit. I can now check this out visually and see, okay, things are moving out a little bit, and this point here, where I was trying to link it to this point, is actually going off in a slightly different direction. It goes down on this point, which gives me a better eye structure as well. I still like this line of the nose that I've drawn, so it hasn't changed a bit. It might come out this way a little bit, so that worked out okay. His eye is in the side of this big space, where this comes around and up, and this is straight across this way. Some of these lines are in the right place. It's just that it was slightly bigger than I had it for this face. I've got to think about this face and how this structure goes, how that cheek comes down in this angle to this point, to give me space for where this line goes, because I think I brought his nose in too far. So I think that's where the line is for his cheek, and this line is his nostril line coming down for where his beard is there, and there's a line that comes down this way, and that curved shadow line underneath is further back over. So I'll kind of move things around a little bit, but it's starting to have more structural elements which are similar to the image that I've got up in front of me. Does that make sense? So again, I'm not rushing the details of this. I'm actually making myself spend time planning this out, not rushing, getting the shapes right first, not guessing that, oh, that's right, I've drawn a nose before, that's definitely a nose, and then it goes here. You can speed up as you develop your skills. That will naturally happen. You can see where that line now is of that edge of the beard. You can see that this now feels like it meets up. This whole space feels better because I've made his eye come out a bit forward. It feels better to the back of his head. The back of his headline coming down is here, and then kicks off this way. A bit of a shadow comes up this way. This line is up here, which gives height to his head. You know, this light highlight that comes down around here, which gives you the center parting almost of his hair up here. If I look at that mark, I can draw a correlation between that one and that one. I know the mark is about there, so I can put a couple of suggested marks of where his hair is coming out that way, coming down that way. Now, some of the initial marks you put in are going to be right straight away. Part of it's because intuitively you've just trusted your eye to your pencil, you put the mark in the right place. Other ones, you'll go through measurements and you'll put a mark down and you think, because I measured it's in the right place, it's still attached to something else, and if that other thing is slightly out, that mark will be out, so you have to move other stuff around. So I'm okay about not getting things in the right place to begin with. I want to approximate them in the right place, approximately putting the eye in the right place, approximately getting the angles right. But I might have to move things around, and that's okay to move things around a little bit until you get more confident about trusting yourself about where things are. So I'm looking at where his eye is on this side, and his eye comes out here to like almost like a square, well, a rectangle shape. Kind of comes up this way and that way. I know this is the top part where his eyelid was. I'm starting to see now of where marks are. I can start to see where that eye starts to go and fit inside that eye shape. Because I got the eye shape right, I can see approximately where how big that eye needs to go inside that shape. Do you understand what I mean? Probably that means okay. That's what I stab it. There we go. I'll just follow up the chat, see if I missed anything. Oh, you've got bad internet right now, that's why you're experiencing. Right, no, now you meant, okay. Yeah, oh, hopefully that gets sorted out for you. Apparently there is a new social network broadband thing coming out for people in certain areas. I know with my phone network provider, the road where I live in is a terrible black spot. Now everywhere else it's fantastic, but where I live, I don't use my phone at home for signals, is awful, and I can't connect. I can't get phone calls and things. Messages tend to come through whenever they want to. Do I have a good upload as opposed to download speed? Yep, I do have a really good upload and download speed. I use with Sky. I'm not saying Sky would be great in your area, it might not be. Look for a provider. If you can check your speed on the internet. If you check in what is my internet speed, there'll be like a little test it can do, and it sends out a ping. Well, it's technically called a ping, and it goes from your computer to the server and then back, and it tells you how long it takes for speed wise. So if you're being sold a package that has a specific speed and you're not getting it, phone up your provider and say, I'm not getting anywhere near the 40 megabytes per second. I'm getting like half. There might be something they can do for you, so check them out first. Yeah, so hopefully that works. I'm getting quite happy with where certain structures are of this head. To move me on to start rendering certain things. I'm not going to do it just yet because there are elements that I've not got there yet. One of them being his mouth we talked about earlier on. I'm quite happy with some of the spaces and the shapes. What I'm going to look at now is his mouth, because I can go across and there's like a straight line that comes straight across here, and if I go up to the point where it goes straight up, it's in the center of his nose, so that's the center of his nose. It comes out to about there. Straight line. This is a shadow, by the way. Then there's like a little curvy bowl, and that curvy bowl starts at the edge of his nose on that side, and from that point it goes up. It goes up at an angle, not a massive angle. There's a straight line that comes down from this point, comes down about there, and they kind of meet a little bit. Again, I'm drawing the shadow shape of his mouth in. This is the shadow shape of his mouth. I actually had that as a corner of his cheek before. Now the shadow that I've actually put in is the shadow shape of the cast shadow from his nose. So this whole area underneath his nose is now where his mouth is. So I can start to see that this line is a bit lower and comes up. It's kind of fluffy here, and it attaches as a space here. This old shadow. As I come away from there, there's a dark mark which is about there, which gives the leading part of this M shape that I talked about before. In the center of his mouth, where his nose is, let's do this. That's where his nostril was. Leading away from there, that's where his nostril line is, and it comes down this side. So in the center of where his nose is, remember it's coming off in this direction. It's not straight because the face isn't straight, it's angled. There's a darker shadow shape there. See under part of his nostril, it comes straight down from there. We get like this wide bit which is his philtrum. Kind of cuts in this way a little bit. There's lots of angles in the shadow that I'm using those shadow shapes to help me, figure out where certain things are as well. See the distance between that curved shadow shape on his nostril. This now becomes where the top of his lip is, and it angles down this way. But just underneath that, this center point here, that's the center point of his mouth. And you get a bit broken kind of M shape. It stops about there. So if I show you that broken kind of M shape, that's his mouth. That's pretty much all I can see of his mouth. I can't really see detail of a top lip and a bottom lip. I know by shadows that's what I'm looking at, and the impression, because it's a very kind of a expressionistic, expressive way of drawing portraits. This line comes up a little bit actually that I have here. So if that line comes up, means this line comes up a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Which gives me depth and space there, so I can get rid of that line. But you can start to see that all these drawn angled structural lines have a real relationship to the image that I'm drawing. To take your time and go work through these different things, and it'll probably be very similar for yourself, Angela, as well, when you're doing your portrait of your face in paint and looking at the structural paint lines. Taking your time to maybe adjust and replace and readjust and replace is okay. Even if you were to start over again, your visual memory would have been taught what does this face look like, how far does that line actually come out, or this brush stroke, etc. So building up the structural marks first can seem laborious and slow and tedious, but after you get invested into looking at this, it gives you a great confidence when you start to do rendering and or painting, where certain features are. You have more confidence about placing the brush stroke. You know, if you to just do a random mark like the shoulder going from his shoulder down here, if I just did that mark to begin with and not have an idea about where his face was, it could throw me out quite a bit. I then have to attach all of this observation to a mark that I've just generally put in, not knowing where it's going. I've got more confidence about putting that mark in once I know where his shoulder is. I've got a better chance of doing that, putting the mark on and scoring down where his shoulder is if I know where his shoulder starts. You see what I mean? That comes from observation, plotting out, doing a little bit of planning work first. The expressive freedom marks, that people often say, I don't like drawing tight, I like to draw loose. Yeah, it's great you like to draw loose. I like to draw loose as well. It's very sculptural, but my background is in sculpture and my natural drawing style is sculptural, but spending this little bit of time mapping things where they should go helps my sculptural drawing, because I get much more expressive correct marks than just randomly sticking them on and hoping for the best. You can train yourself visually. As you start to train your eye, you don't have to go into the minutiae of everything so much. You could perhaps start with the shape and break that down, because you start to trust where your shapes are, because you've trusted your eye. These marks where the back of the head is, or how hair flicks out from the corner of his head, to create a little highlight. So that's a highlight mark rather than a structural mark. I don't want to start to confuse the two things. How this mark moves in and goes up for this hair flick, how the hair comes down over the top of it, over here. How far away is that mark, that highlight part of his hair that comes up and over his head? Up here, how far away is that from the corner of his head? That mark comes in and over that way as a relationship to this eyebrow ridge. All of these marks, whether it's structural elements or whether they're shadow marks or expressive marks, should have a relationship with each other to create a face. Hope all that makes sense. If anything I say doesn't make sense, you can say, don't know what that means. And then we can break it down, go through it. Okay? There's certain elements of people, like, if you watch one picture of Bob Ross, I'm not slating Bob Ross because he's very popular with everybody. And there was an Irish version that we were discussing at work the other day. I work in a school, so I was working with another art teacher. I'm the art technician there. She mentioned the Irish version of Bob Ross, and it's not what he's doing is necessarily wrong. There's elements of it are right, and there are elements of wonderfully fun just to look at, how people are creating happy little trees and mountain ranges and sea, etc. But where he was in a specific place and he was drawn a specific landscape, it wasn't really the landscape that he was painting. He was painting his impression of it, and he was using techniques to give illusionary elements of what waves look like. Now, if you go down a specific day and it feels like something, it feels like there's a wild sea, but you can only draw sea because you've only learnt this technique in how you draw sea. You will draw sea the same time and time and time and time again, and it won't look like the place that you remember. It won't feel like the place you remember. And remember, there's an artistic element that you're using techniques to marry with your concept, your artistic poetry side, and you need to match them rather than just apply them because that's how you do things. So happy little trees are great for happy little scenes about happy little trees, but if you're doing an element of a tree which isn't a happy little tree, it's something else, you've got to be able to find a technique. So if you think this is how trees are done and you apply that process to everything that you do, it doesn't work. You've got to look at the image that you're working from. You've got to look at the scene that you're looking at. What do those trees look like? What shapes are they? How do they fit in the composition? Mark those in. What textures are they? Well, that tree over there is a different texture from this tree down here, so I've got two different trees going on. The light catching this tree makes it look like this, very dramatic, very high contrast, but this tree down in the foreground is very soft. I have to paint them differently. I can't use the same technique. So just be careful when you're watching videos that if they go, this is how you do it, it generally is how they do that particular tree, I'm using the tree as an example, or that particular portrait, or they draw eyes in that particular way for that particular face. It doesn't apply to every face that you draw. It doesn't apply to every landscape you do. You've got to look at the process behind it, how they observe things, how they lay things down. Now there's lots of different ways of drawing portraits. This is just one of them. If the flavour of what I'm doing doesn't fit, find the podcasts and the artists that are working in a particular genre that you really like. Seek them out. This might be the jumping off point of your investigation into your artwork, and that's okay. That's what this is here for. But come back and tell me where they are, because I might be interested in them as well. I think there's always a benefit of sharing your information out, where you're learning from, who you learn, what are they teaching you, how does that relate to what I'm saying? Does it contradict each other? Does it work in tandem? It might be slightly different. I mean, this book I'm using, I'm kind of going through the process slower. Some of the elements in this book are quite interesting. He's talking about how different contouring lines do different things. How two concave lines together don't actually help you find form. Two convex lines do. Which is, I've never really heard that said before. What it did, it reminded me of when I was in school with English, and they would give you certain rules, and they would say I before E except after C, and you go, okay, I have to do E except after C. So every time you spell the word, you go, they say I before E except after C. They go, oh no, you spelled that wrong. No, I didn't. I followed the rule. I go, oh yeah, the rule works, but not in this case. And then you'd find 3 or 4 cases where that rule didn't work, and then it would just confuse me. And then I used to question all the rules that they were giving me about grammar and punctuation and how you structure sentences and paragraphs, etc. And I thought, well, is this a rule? Is this a rule I have to follow? Is this the rule of the English language? And yes, they are, but they also get broken an awful lot because of other reasons. And as you delve deeper, you find that some of those rules that you have to stick to as a student or a child are flexible, and how different writers would have had a flow of consciousness when they wrote. So they didn't have only 12 words in a sentence. That doesn't exist. And in time, as well, as teaching moves and develops, teaching styles change over periods of time. So how we are taught as children from my generation is very much different to the way kids are taught today, and also how my parents' generation were taught. The content of it changes, and art is no different. If you look back to the 70s, and I think we had Painting with Nancy, and the other artistic go-to would have been Take Art with Morph and Tony. Even some of the artistic things he used to do in play school. So it's a nod to Floella Benjamin as well, because there was an influence as a small child in the 70s, and how that's developed is different from, say, Art Attack from the 90s for kids. And I don't know what the art programs are on TV now for kids, because I'm not sort of engaged with watching kids TV. I had a child, Ethan, in 1999. So Art Attack would have been sort of early 2000s, and that kind of connection with children watching art that I would have reflected back onto. Oh, I remember Tony Hart, and we did the same, something similar. All has an effect on artists today working. The difference is, as an artist, you're always trying to push yourself forward to learn different appreciations or different aspects of it. So even if we're looking at through the atelier system that they're teaching there, has a nod to the atelier system that was used in the past, but it's slightly different. Where they have acknowledged, I think, now where the artistic freedom is important to go hand in hand with the artistic technical side. They teach you the technical side, which is incredibly valuable. Learning the skill of something really helps you express artistically, whereas you just teach expression artistically and don't teach the technique to go hand in hand with it, you become to a point where your artistic demand, what you want to try and say about your artwork, doesn't meet your technical capability, and it kind of flounders a little bit, or your artistic technicality takes over your concepts and your ideas, where it just becomes the same carbon copy, same thing over and over again, and it becomes a bit flat and dull. Beautiful, well executed, doesn't say anything. Says a lot, doesn't communicate anything. Can you see how these two things have a problem? Where I can see artwork kind of meeting now is where people's expertise and their technical ability, but also their concepts and how they're delivering it, is starting to meet, and it's starting to make a real connection with artists out there. And that's why programs like Sky Portrait Artists of the Year, Landscape Artists of the Year, are starting to really make a connection with people. People want to know how to do something, but are appreciating different art forms and how things are expressed, and that things that they never thought about before, how people have expressed things, suddenly make a connection with them, more so than the technical ability of making things look like they are a photograph. Making things look like a photograph is not bad, it's just a particular art genre. Making things look abstract isn't bad, it's just a particular art structure. As you develop as an artist, what's visually interesting to you? That's the important thing. This is just a brief introduction into the technical about how you place things on a page to get a representation. But what you do with it from this point is up to you. If you decide to paint this in bright bold colours and use it, it would still look like this guy because we've got the structure of it. If you wanted to play around with the structure of it and abstract it, working from a point representation to abstract, to play around with visually what's interesting to you, what you're trying to express about him. So, say for example, it was the drama of it. You might play around with these big block areas and do it in bold graphic lines that the whole thing is just black and this is just white. You remove the face completely, or you give a nod to a shape of where an eye is, and it's an abstraction, but it has an element and a basis in observation, something you've observed. And I think that's what's really interesting about some good abstract artwork and good expressive artwork, that they've really understood what it is they're looking at. So the observation is very key to almost whatever genre of artwork that you're looking at. What you physically see in front of you, whether it be from a photographic image or physical in front of you, how those things can affect you, how you then want to portray them, what technical skills do you need to do that, how are you going to place it, how are you going to compose it. So a lot of these things kind of marry together. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I went off on a bit of a rant. You can bounce back and disagree or agree. I've got no problem if people disagree with me artistically, because I think it's important. It's always valid. It's where people's perceptions and prejudices get in the way of them appreciating other art forms, or understanding that somebody's different point of view is as valid. So I'm much more open as an artist, and I think that's really been my key strength. Is being open to influence, open to different styles, understanding that some things I look at, I can appreciate, I don't necessarily like. Two different things. What sparks my interest and my artistic, fires my artistic palette, go, ooh, that looks really good, I love that visually. What is it about it that I really like? I start to question myself, what is it I really like about that? And then if I can look at something and go, oh, it doesn't tick my boxes, but I can see its qualities, it doesn't necessarily mean to say I'm going to run off and try and create artwork that I don't necessarily have a connection with. We're all different, and that's an important thing to remember when we're looking at artworks. We are all different. People produce them differently for different reasons, with different intent, with different artistic parameters and aims. And if you start to understand those things, you can appreciate a piece of artwork. You might not necessarily like it. When you like a piece of artwork and you find out what those aims and learning curves are, about why that person's done it this way, it can add to your artwork. You can go, oh, I understand that. That's something I really like, and it's something I want to try and achieve, and it's a goal for me to head towards. They're really helpful. So try and kind of enjoy artwork on that basis. So when you're looking through something, if you see something that you really don't like, understand what it is you don't like about it. If you look at something and you find something you really like, try and understand what it is you really like about it. I think we've, especially with social media, where we can put hearts and thumbs up and things like that on different elements about what you like and don't like. If that's very black and white thinking, try and investigate a little bit. Just have a little bit of thought process about, well, what is it you really like about that. You might hate this image, but visually I like it. I liked it, as I said before, because of that kind of touch to the dramatic and the expressive bold lines, but also the careful consideration of light and dark. But it reminded me of when I was a kid watching black and white movies. That kind of very over dramatic 1940s high key contrast light, and that's what it reminds me of. That might not be the intent of the artist, but visually that's why I like it. When I go down the route of investigating an artist, I find out why that person's done it in this particular way, what their philosophy and thoughts on art are. Do they match with mine? Sometimes they don't, but I like their images, because their images remind me of something else. That's okay. That's valid. What your response is valid. What the artistic intention of the artist is valid for them. This is where people fall into the trope of saying, oh, it means whatever it wants to mean to the people are viewing it. No, that's weak. That I don't like. To me, if an artist has an intention, that's good. If the artist's intention is to create a piece of artwork that can mean anything to everybody and anything, it's a bit woolly, and I lose a bit of kind of faith in the artist and what they were trying to say themselves. It's either they don't know what they were trying to say themselves, or they just don't want to get involved with a conversation about what their artwork means, which is okay if they just say that. You don't have to explain your artwork to everybody if you don't want to. Nobody's forcing you to. But if you have an intent, it helps you figure out what it is you need to do in your artwork. If you do an artwork and it just kind of happens and you don't got a clue why it's happening, it gets very hard to replicate the processes that are successful. And you kind of like shooting in the dark. You hit one occasionally, but like 25 times having got an artwork misses. Understand what it is that misses. How do you move it and change it to develop a work where you become more prolific in producing artworks that you are actually have an intention and achieve an intention that you're in control of. Hopefully that makes sense. I see a lot of how-to movies and how-to books, and they're great. You copy them all day long, and then people go, oh yeah, I've got relatively a good handle on how to do things now because I've followed all these books and been on courses. And then they hit with a face and they go, how do I draw that face? And they go back. They just forget all the technical side of it they've learned because they don't know how to apply it to what they physically see. So have a go at doing your artwork for yourselves. What is it you like? Bring those to the fore. It might help yourself ask questions to me about what is it you want to do and what is it you're doing at the moment, and why are they two different things. Why is it you're not achieving certain elements in your work? I'm doing it all the time. It's a constant part of my process where I'm looking at my work and going, okay, it's okay, but I now want a little bit more. And we're constantly pushing. As artists, you're constantly pushing the boundaries of what your capabilities are. That's okay, that's good, but I want a little bit more, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to change that, and I want to move this, and I want this to kind of come across. If I'm intentionally trying to get a certain mood or evoke a certain response from the visual aspect, I must understand what it is I'm trying to do. I can't just cross my eyes and hope for the best. Now, it's not to say that that will be successful 100% of the time. I will get to that intention more successfully if I understand my aim, understand what it is I'm trying to say, understand the technical side of what I need to do. But literally, people are humans, so when you put this out into the artworks, they will then start to attach their own take on things, which is fine. At that point, you've got to step back from it and filter out what's relevant and what's not relevant. So I've done pictures in there before, and people have gone, "Oh, look, that just looks weird. Why would you do that person doing that? Nobody would do that. I wouldn't do that." And they make it very personal about them. Now, I don't know them. They're bringing their own prejudices to the artwork. But what's interesting is their response. And I might use that for another artwork. But you'll get other people go, I know what that means. I have a connection with that. And I think, oh, great, you're my audience. If you think about watching TV, there are different audiences for different types of television. There are different audiences for different types of artwork. It's no different. But you can love art in general. You can love TV in general. You know, it doesn't mean to say you watch everything on TV. It doesn't mean to say you look at all of the artwork. So, do most abstract have their core some observation or something real in your experience? When somebody are abstracting something, yes. When somebody are expressing something, no. It doesn't have to be a physicality of observation. It can be an observation or an understanding of a thought, an expression or a feeling. They have an understanding of what that feeling is. They'll try to emote that feeling in their texture or brushstroke or element of physical artwork. They go for that, but that's still an observation in its sense. It's an observation of understanding. They've recognized something in themselves that they want to try and get down on paper, or they have thought about something going on in society and wanted to create a response for it. So they've observed something in society and their response is expression, and they're creating their artwork that is expression. There's abstract expressionists, so there's a whole gamut of different levels of artwork in there. So even if we look at realism, there's representationalism. You know, this man looks like a man, he looks like a man with a white beard, and it's a representation of him. Is it realism? It's certainly a realistic depiction of a man, but when you look at the abstract nature of his shoulder, that one mark from his shoulder going from the top left to the bottom right, it just reads as a shoulder. It's not a shoulder, it's not realistic. So there's an element of expression there. So is this realist expression? So it's only we like to put labels on things. It's what I like to say, it's more the taste and the flavour of the artwork, because they're much more visceral, they're much more instinctual, and then to break it down is to try and understand what you feel and think. Helps you find a technique in which to do that, and that mark comes from understanding the structure of the form, which comes from observation. Putting that mark down is very bold and expressive, but you can see how dense it is at the top and how it kind of fades away. Has been done with a certain speed. That artist, Nimnik Folks book, has got used to it and knows what the material does and plays with it and does certain things with it and expresses it and uses it in different formats, and you know, pulls and pushes the charcoal across the page to see what kind of marks it makes. So those elements of playing with your medium, whichever it is you like, paint, pencil, charcoal, whatever, can sometimes lead you into happy accidents. Oh, I didn't know it could do that. That's a really nice texture. That's a nice kind of feel. I like that. I'll store that in my memory bank and put that in my artistic toolbox and go, okay, when I need something that looks dramatic and looks high contrast, this dark mark against this white background and swishes past because it gives it an energy that he's moving and jutting forward. I know which mark to do, but I need to know where it starts. I need to know which direction it's going in, because if I bent that mark going around the other way, it wouldn't look like his shoulder and his arm. Do you see what I mean? If that mark curved that way, it wouldn't look like an arm, but because it bows this way, it does look like an arm. Do you see what I mean? So the difference between expression and abstraction is still important to something that has a certain amount of realism to it. If you look at most realism and you break it down and you zoom into it, has an expression of texture. This is not a beard I am drawing, it is the impression of a beard. It is the texture of a beard, but it is not a beard. It's like that surrealist painting, this is not a pipe. It isn't a pipe, it's a painting of a pipe. This isn't a beard, it's a drawing of a beard. I can't see individual hairs. I'm not interested in individual hairs. I'm interested in the texture of it, textural element. Maybe one or two little highlights he's suggested, which just add that little bit of narrative to it. So yeah, art is such a vast subject. It's like music. Think about that. In different genres of music, different sounds, they can cross over. You know, you can hear a bluesiness to reggae. You can hear reggae coming into punk. You can hear blues in metal music. You can hear all these different genres touching each other in different ways. How electronic medium has changed music to synthesizers and different effects on pedals and things like that, back from when they didn't have it back in the day, when they were making the guitars do different things to make different sounds. So they were detuning the scale, all to give a certain flavour of music, a different pace, tempo. Very, very similar to art in that respect. Fashion, how fashion changes, gives you different tempo and beat and bass, and popularity of one musical instrument over another musical instrument. So if you think back to sort of late 80s and early 90s, there seemed to be a saxophone in every single song, and now there isn't. Now saxophones are still great pieces of are still a great musical instrument, but fashionably they're not, maybe not as important, but necessarily in jazz they might be. So different genres have different fashions in different moments, have different influences. What's popular becomes an influence for the next musician. You know, different music companies want certain more brands of music because that one was popular over there, so let's create more of them here. So you have different music movements going on. So you'll have punk, you'll have rock and hip hop, and all the rest of it. So yeah, a bit of an more interesting chat and conversation today than it was necessarily when you draw it today. But I think I'm trying to get the point across about how you draw, what it is you want to draw, what it is you need to do to your learning to get you to the place where you want to be. You kind of have to break it down a little bit and observe what it is you want. So certainly the process of my drawing today has followed a very kind of, is that in the right place, move it around. It sounds quite basic, but it is the basis, not the basic, but the basis of your art form, which can then go off in lots of different directions. It gives you a freedom, and I think it's a good start. It's not the only start out there. There's lots of different drawing classes and painting classes you can go to which teach you how to be free by making marks. And they're important as long as you know how to use them, because you can't emote everywhere. If you're trying to tell something or express something artistically, because you'll find you can maybe do one picture in 50 or 60, which would be the one that you're looking for. We shouldn't really have to do 50 or 60 paintings which are irrelevant before you get that one. If you start to understand what it is, you start to have more control over your expression and your intent for your abstraction and your sensitivity to tone, light, texture, line, form, solidity, ethereal effervescence. So if you have a look at some of the marks in the background are quite fluffy and light and delicate and ethereal, like they're not almost solid, the ghostly, kind of get the illusion that they're in the background. The structural, sharper, darker marks give form, give definite structure to his physical form, appear to push things forward. Abstract means the only artist knows what they intended for the most part. Do most abstract have their co-observation? Abstract means only the artist knows what they intended for the most part. The funny thing is, not necessarily, because I think good abstract art reads really well. So if you have a look at this artwork, Nude Descending the Staircase, you can see a figure descending a staircase. Now, it's not just suggested in the title. The image itself looks like a figure descending a staircase. It doesn't representationally look like a realistic figure descending a staircase, but you can see the movement of lines and marks of a figure descending a staircase. So their intent, yes, definitely known by the artist, but it doesn't mean to say it can't be read by everybody else. So the abstraction is from a certain perspective of the artist, yes, but it's not only that the artist knows what they were trying to intend, if that makes sense. So yeah, check out that artwork, Google it. It's a little challenge for this week. Nude Descending a Staircase. You can see how artists throughout the art history have used abstraction in certain forms. If you go right back to art when it first started off in the representation of human form, we understood what the head was and shoulders and body. So if you have a look at the figures from the Easter Island, they're a stylized version, they're an abstraction, a stylized version of what the human form is, but we see it as a human form. The heads on the Easter Island, the big long noses, the cyclic art of how they simplified the arms and how they were folded across the body, shape of the body, the belly of the figure. They're an abstraction. They're not a realist version. They're an abstraction. It's not they couldn't carve, because these carvings are beautiful. The technicality of how they've shaped and carved stone or carved clay into those forms is so delicate that they have the capability of creating a realistic image that you might see in Greek times, that the Romans then started to replicate. They replicated almost a stylized version of a Greek sculptures. You look at the simplicity and subtlety of the human form on a Greek sculpture, you can see the stylized version of it in Roman form, which then maybe inferred itself into the Renaissance, and then it became a stylized version, because the cherubs that Michelangelo did aren't necessarily realistic, but they have a certain realism to them. But then how that's developed as well, how it's developed into hyperrealism, where it looks like a photograph, and it's not to say that it's cheapened by that, because the technical skill is amazing, and if it's done well, its illusionary aspect is engaging and draws you in visually. Because if you're told it's a painting and you're looking at it going, I can't believe my eyes, this is a painting, it's drawn you into the image of it. What you need to then set back is the technical side of it and look at what is the imagery about that holds it up as a good piece of artwork. How artists play with that as well. You've got a lot of photographers who are trying to make their artworks look painterly, and a lot of painters trying to make their artwork look like a photograph. It's interesting. I'm going to have to go now as well. Alex, a great conversation. Some great questions as well. Really, really appreciate you asking the questions as well. It's part of the art chat. It's just not about the demonstrations as well. It's about the art chat. Hopefully the two things kind of link together, and that's what we're all about today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to call it an end for now. I'm going to do the live Sky Portrait Artist of the Week tomorrow on Sunday at 10 o'clock on the Facebook Sky TV page. You'll see it'll come up. That's the UK time, 10 o'clock AM. It's for 4 hours. You can post your artworks up on Instagram, #MyPAOTW, and you'll see everybody's responses from during the process all the way through till Friday at 2 o'clock. They pick a winner. They pick a first, second and third of their choices. It's interesting to see what the choices are as well. Guys, I really appreciate you by being here. Drop me a line, drop me a message if you want to. You can do that on Instagram, you can do it on Facebook. It's Lee Boyd Artist on both of them. You can leave a message here in the comments if you like. If you liked it, great. Throw me a like, share it, post it up elsewhere if you want to. More than welcome. Really enjoyed it. I'm going to be back here again same time next week, 2 PM UK time, Saturday, for more Art Cat. Alright guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it this week. Alex, great conversation, and thank you Angela as well. Alright, see you guys next week.